The 1960 classic horror movie Psycho, directed by the master suspense Alfred Hitchcock, is one of the movies of the era that stood out. From the way it was filmed to release, nothing about the film was normal by standards of the time. For this reason, it stirred up a bit of controversy in the film community. In the 1920s, Hollywood was in a world of scandals. Due to this, audiences began to boycott the films. At this time, film wasn't considered a form of free speech, so to avoid government censorship, the formation of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, the MPPDA, was essential. In an effort to avoid government censorship, the MPPDA decided to self-censor. This led William H. Hayes, the president of the MPPDA, to create the Motion Picture Production Code, or the Hays Code. The code's guidelines included keeping Catholic and family values, no explicit content, good must win and evil must be punished at the end, nothing can promote bad values, and no offensive sayings. But these rules didn't just act as guidelines, but they acted as an outline for writers. But then, the Great Depression hit, tanking sales for all Hollywood movies. For 4 years from 1930 to 1934, the code was basically non-existent. This caused Catholics to begin the Legion of Decency, which began to rate all movies with A for morally unobjectionable, B for morally objectionable in part, and C for condemned. To avoid more boycotts, the MPPDA began the Production Code Administration, the PCA, with Catholic layman Joseph Breen at its head. The PCA had authority to change anything in the final script or cut of movies that did not align with their views. But after a law passed that film studios could not own theaters, things started to change. Theaters began to show foreign films that did not abide by the code of the time, and studios couldn't do a thing about it. Psycho follows Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, who after stealing $40,000 so she can run away with her boyfriend Sam, played by John Gavin. On her run, she stops at the Bates Motel, run by Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins' character. From here, the movie follows Sam and Lillian Crane, the sister of Marion, played by Vera Miles, looking for Marion who has gone missing. Coming off of his last movie, North by Northwest, which did well, Hitchcock wanted something new. Hitchcock was reading the New York Times book section when he saw a great review for the book Psycho. He tried to get Paramount to cover it, but it wasn't until he was flying back to London when he got a chance to read it. Once he did, he called back to his offices and said, "I've got our next subject, Psycho." Movies from the 50s had mature topics like the 60s, but they quickly became stale due to their repetitive nature. In the book The A-List, it says, filmmakers and audiences began to get sick of the old stultified formula. But Psycho was different.
When I met Mr. Hitchcock at my first meeting, I had to convince him that I could write this movie. And I felt that the best way to do it would be to simultaneously interest him in how I saw it being done and solve the main problem of the material, which was a boy with a dead mother, and we weren't supposed to know she was dead. So I conceived of the story being about Marion, lovely young lady who's having a disastrous affair with a man who can't marry her. She's a rather moral girl, and she has just put herself in a trap, and that she's got to get out of it. And she decides to return the money, and she feels good about this, and she takes a very cleansing shower, and someone comes in and murders her. And at that moment, Hitch said we could get a star to play that part. And I knew I had a job, because he liked that whole introduction to the movie. He liked the fact that it was going to be about her. And then we were suddenly going to do this awful thing to you. Say, no, it's not about her, it's about him.
During filming, Psycho faced several challenges, mainly with censorship. The scenes that were in question include the opening sequence and the iconic shower sequence. A letter from Paramount about Psycho states, "We reviewed this picture in our projection room on February 19, 1960. It is necessary for us to reject it under the code for the following reasons. 1. In the opening sequence, the lovemaking on the bed is entirely too passionate. Both the man and the woman are only partly dressed and rolling around in the bed looking extremely lustful. intimacies, including, among other things, a quite blatant open-mouth kiss. 2. There's a line to which we objected at script level, and which is still in this picture, to the effect that the bed is the only playground that beats Vegas. We still object to this line as being undubitably pointed. 3. By far the most important objection, however, consists of the murder sequence in the shower of Janet Leigh. The sequence opens with a peeping Tom scene, in which the murderer sees her undressed and presumably sees her partly nude. This stimulates him to the crime which follows. Parenthetically, it can be said that it would seem to be possible to cure this item by cutting, so that the inference would be that the most the peeping Tom sees is the girl in her half slip and brassiere. The shower sequence has a number of shots, some impressionistic, some completely realistic, of the girl's nude body. All of these shots are in violation of the code, which prohibits nudity in fact or in silhouette. The content wasn't the only thing that people debated. The way the movie was being shown was completely different.
One day we'd finished shooting, and Hitch said, you know, people who come in late to see Psycho will wonder, where's Janet Leigh? And they'll keep on waiting for her, and she'll be dead, and they won't know it. Well, what can be done about it? So he thought, while we were talking, and he said, you shouldn't allow people into the theatre after the film has started. They'll see Janet will be orderly and everyone will realize it. So I laughed. I didn't think it would be possible to tell theatre managers when to show the picture and when not to. And he convinced Paramount, publicity, this was the way to start it, and the whole ball started rolling then. And it was successful because the theatre managers cooperated.
No one, but no one, will be admitted to the theater after the start of each performance of Psycho.
This also meant that critics had to see the film in theaters, which led them to give negative scores. There was some diplomacy in the filmmaking, however. It was reported that Hitchcock resubmitted an unaltered version of the shower sequence, when censors could not decide if the sequence had nudity or not. Hitchcock offered to refilm the shocking opening sequence with Sam and Marion embracing semi-nude on a bed in exchange for approval of the shower sequence. As for its release, diplomacy was critical. The movie was distributed by Paramount, but the film was entirely paid for by Hitchcock because Paramount saw the subject matter as revolting. Without a big company like Paramount distributing, the film might not have been seen at all, and its impact would have been lost forever. Psycho had a massive impact on the film industry. It was under $1 million and made 15 times more than it cost. This killed the film industry. In the book, The A-List, it states, in many ways, Psycho seems like a death knell for the studio system that would lumber on for a few more years before collapsing late into the decade. In a couple years, Psycho already had an impact when films like Bonnie and Clyde and Night of the Living Dead, which similarly had dark topics, started to release. But Psycho didn't just affect Hollywood then. It inspired some of the most iconic slashers like Halloween, Scream, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All in all, Psycho is fighting an uphill battle with people saying what can and can't be shown, but it stuck to its guns and it became one of the most iconic films in history.